Grief isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome to the Empowered Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm the grief and empowerment coach, author, and creator of the Empowered Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. Each episode features real conversations with people from around the world who have navigated the grief and profound loss and found strength to rebuild their lives with courage and intention. Together, we'll explore what it means to move from survival to integration, to reclaim your identity, honor your grief, and create a future grounded in truth, resilience, and purpose. If you're walking through loss and wondering what comes next, you're not alone. Walk with us as we transform grief into growth, one story at a time. Today, our guest is Gail Showalter. She's a public speaker, author, and founder of a nonprofit organization called Single Moms Empowered. She's raised three children as a single parent for 16 years, and she joins us today to share her grief story and her healing journey with us that has led her to where she is today. So, Gail, I'd like to welcome you onto the podcast.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Likewise, and I'm happy to talk to a Texan down there. It's got to be nicer weather than the cold, rainy weather in Seattle today.
I have to tell you, I don't like rain, cold rain. I don't like it. And we have sunshine today. It's really nice, 45 degrees sunshine. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, like I said, I'm really grateful to have the chance to talk with you today. And to get us started on the show, I just wanted to open it up to you to tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and where your grief journey started.
Oh, okay. I was blessed. I had this great childhood and I had this pretty picture perfect marriage and family. I was the youngest of four, but I had successful older siblings, and I thought my life would follow their suit. And my husband was a Navy officer. He got married in his white uniform, and it was all very exciting. And we had three babies in 3 years, and I don't recommend that. And he was working for my family business. And there's all these stories about family business. Well, yeah. Um, when my youngest child was 3, he started an affair with somebody at work. Now, I want to say how this all relates to grief because I've had just about every kind of grief in my life. I mean, I'm an old bird. I've been around the block a few times. I've lost parents. I've lost parents who were sick for a long time. I've lost a parent who shouldn't have died when he was 66. I know that kind of grief. I have not lost a child, almost, but did not lose a child to death. However, the grief that I experienced when my marriage fell apart was overwhelming. I uh I know a lot of women who are divorced. I mean, I've been through it with them. I'm a life coach. I work with single mothers, so I know a lot about what they go through and what it's all different. It's not the same for everyone. And during the time of my separation and divorce, which took a while, my counselor, and I don't want to offend anyone. I'm going to give a caveat here. I don't want anyone to take this and be offended by it, but it's what was said. My counselor knew the situation. He had met my ex who came in for a session, didn't pay for it, but came in. And he told me, he said, what you're going through is so difficult. It would be easier for you if he had died. Now, I'm not saying that to women who are widows that this is, a different kind of a situation. I'm just saying that there are situations which linger and the hope gets dashed and you get stabbed over and over and over and there doesn't seem to be any end to it. And I expect from what I know now that I was married to a narcissist and it just fits. But I didn't know that then. I didn't know what was going on. I mean, I was trying to manage three little babies. And so I'm just telling that to women who may be going through this kind of heartache and this kind of grief and think, well, I shouldn't be feeling. And people did tell me, you should be over this. Come on, smile. This is not that bad, you know. And so that doesn't help a woman. That doesn't help someone who's grieving deeply. Now, I don't know who in your audience is familiar with the Enneagram, but I'm a 4 on the Enneagram, and we carry grief real deeply and heavily. And I always used to say, I look around, you know, and I'd see people who had been divorced, and they didn't seem to be having as much problem as I did. But the thing was, when the person who victimizes you, I'm sorry to use another buzzword there, but the person who victimizes you and causes you the grief has absolutely no remorse. It's as if I didn't do anything. Of course, my brother had fired him, so there was an ego issue there for him as well. But anyway, I want women to know that when you're hurting, reach out, you know, get help. And I could not have made it through if I didn't have that weekly counseling session. And thank God I could afford that because it was a lifeline for me. Now, I've had grief since then, other types of grief, and I know the harshness of it. You know, I say grief is a visitor that comes uninvited and stays longer than you want it to. And then it comes in waves when you'll be going about your life and you'll think, okay, I got this together. And then something will just hit you again, like this person is gone. I had an older sister who was like a mom to me. She was 16 when I was born. And a couple years ago, I went out to visit her. I was bringing her some gumbo. That's what we do down here in Southeast Texas. And she was dead. And yeah, it was a day, you know, I won't ever forget it. And so there's that kind of grief, but it's not they're different. They're all different. And so give yourself a break. If you're grieving a loss, you know, give yourself some time and treat yourself gently. Don't be harsh
So,
on yourself.
so Gail, can I ask you a question about because you and I are from two different generations, and today's in my generation, you know, we hear the term narcissism flipped around a lot, and it's very predominant, in my opinion, overused in many ways or misjudged and labeled. In your generation, when you experienced that type of abuse, was that talked about much openly, or was it very kind of in the dark in the shadows?
It was not talked about at all. In fact, if I had known then what I have learned now, things could have been a lot different as far as how I handled it. There's a book that I came across almost miraculously, actually, called um, it's People of the Lie by M. Scott Peck. And that book came to me in a supernatural way, but it was after all many, many years. If I had had that book years ago, and it's not like it's focusing on narcissism because it's not a new book, but it focuses on people who do not see the world like other people. I mean, you know, you can say normal, abnormal, you can say what you want to, but uh, for example, there was an illustration at the beginning of the book, a couple, and this is written by a psychiatrist, M. Scott Peck, really famous psychiatrist, written several great books. And it starts out with this couple who had two sons, and one son committed suicide. And the next Christmas, they gave the other son the gun that he had used for Christmas. And they acted like they didn't see anything wrong with that. And so I'm telling you, there are people who just don't see the world. I mean, to me, it's skewed thinking, it's twisted, and some people call it evil. You can call it what you want to, but you need to be able to recognize it. When a person doesn't have empathy. Now, I'm an empath. I have too much empathy. I didn't want my husband to put a mousetrap out. I don't like killing anything. He said, would you rather have the mousetrap or the mice? I said, well, so I'm just saying there are some of us that can be too empathetic. And that's not necessarily good either. I mean, it's hard. But there are people who have no empathy. None.
And
And
and what
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to ask, you brought up that you had to raise three children on your own. What was that like when you separated from your husband and trying to deal with that grief of going through divorce and trying to understand that narcissism that was happening there, trying to raise a family and take care of children at the same time? Did you give yourself moments in between that upbringing of children to process and try to understand what was going on?
I tried. I really, and that was the biggest problem. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't comprehend how this was happening, that this person was behaving the way that he was behaving. Strange. It was different than I had seen. It was like he flipped a coin, flipped his personality. So, yeah, and I know there are women who say everything was fine until he did this or that, or he started becoming abusive. And so those things happen too. Now, first of all, you asked me how I managed. First of all, it took a couple of years for me to get my head on straight. I mean, 2 years at least. And he had visitation and he paid child support. Wasn't a great amount, but he paid it. And he, I found out later, when the children would be with him and her, they would, this was before cell phones, they would unplug all the phones so the kids couldn't call me. They couldn't get in touch
Wow.
with me. And they were constantly doing things that were just not ethical, not moral, not nice. And so it wasn't one felt swoop and the divorce was over. No, it wasn't like that. It just kept on going and things kept happening. And what hurt was seeing my children disappointed and what they had to deal with. And even to this, they're grown, they're probably your age. And each of them has handled it differently. One of them
Mm.
has nothing to do with him, nothing. The other two try to understand. One of them said to the sister, he said, you just have to get to the point where you accept how he is. And so
Mm.
you say, how did I accept it? How I didn't. But when I started making the changes in my own life and I went back to college, I took a huge leap. I, I went to graduate school in Austin. Now that's everybody doesn't realize how big Texas really is, but from my house to Austin is 5 hours. And so I went back to school there, and it was a huge event. I mean, I tell that story in center some publication I've written. And I took three kids with me, 9, 8, and 6 years old, and I managed to get through graduate school. And so, but
Wow.
that helped me more than any single other thing I did. I got a piano because I'd wanted a piano, and that was just something just for me. But most women, you get stuck if you're having to go to work for the first time, or if you're having to be the primary breadwinner, then you are really in a situation where you need support. You need a support system. Now, there are more support systems now than there were then. There are numerous ones online. Not that that's a touchy-feely one, but there are single moms out there communicating with each other. And I think that that's real important because I had another friend of mine who was single, and she and I shared the load a lot. We exchanged kids for each other and that sort of thing. And that was really helpful because you need somebody to
But
pick the kids up from school. And my mom was handy. If the kids were sick, I couldn't just walk out. I was a school teacher. I couldn't just walk out of school and go pick, I had to be there. And they wouldn't like that very much if I said I'm leaving. You can't leave a classroom full of kids. So my mother was helpful. If you don't have that, it becomes really difficult. But I think some marriages are really difficult too.
Well, I think something you touched on that happens a lot in narcissistic relationships, and I've researched a lot because I've experienced that abuse with certain people. And what we always get caught in that loop with that form of abuse is we don't really understand it. And like you said, if you're somebody that has a lot of empathy and you have a kind soul and you're brought up to do right for others and, work things out in a normal way like most of us do, but you run across somebody like that who doesn't have those traits at all, and they're extremely destructive and very, one of the terms they like to flip around a lot is breadcrumbing. They don't want to let go fully. They keep you attached in these little tiny ways so that it's always a miserable point at some point, and it's hard to get away from it. But it's also hard when you're grieving a relationship like that to understand, why did this have to happen this way? What caused this to happen? And you just end up in a cycle loop constantly. And I love that you went to school and broke away for 5 hours on a drive to be able to give yourself space to, I don't like calling it a distraction, but giving yourself a purpose and a meaning in life that can allow that space for you to start processing.
Yeah, and it kind of recreates a new identity too. I had to find a place to live. I had to find a place for the kids to stay. I had to go through all, and it worked. And the fact that it worked out was just like, I look back on it even and think, how did the world that work? And so, yeah, it gave me a new sense of identity. And not all moms can do that. I know. Well, that's one of the things the organization I'm with does, helps moms. But it's a way of recreating your life, reestablishing your identity and who you are and what you want to do with your future, not just getting in a rut and thinking there's no way out. And I see that
So,
too.
so what was that like for you? Because I know you said it's about a couple year period there to get your head straight with what was going on and really process and understand things. What was it like for you after that 2 year period? What did the healing journey look like for you?
I began to accept the fact that this was the way it was. And I tell people you have that, you're an acceptance coach. And that's an important thing I tell people about grief. Any kind of grief, the death of a loved one, even, is you have to get to that point where you've accepted it, or the grief is going to just linger forever. And so I did get to that point of acceptance. And then I started figuring out ways to redirect my future. And the jobs I had didn't make it easy. Um, but I did have some people along the way that saw me and helped. And by that I mean, okay, I had a principal say if you want to have a job in education, you're going to need to have more than one certification subject that you can teach, because I was secondary education. And so I ended up with an extra certification, which got me a job. But then it also got me a really crazy job with several different topics every day, which I don't like, didn't recommend either. But then ultimately, the same person recruited me to teach Braille. And that
Mm.
meant I had to go back to school again. But they knew I was crazy enough to do it. Here's the thing, I tell moms and I tell women, don't close doors. Don't assume you can't do this or you've got to do this. Think about it with an open mind. What are the options for you? What are the options for your future that you're capable of, pardon me, you're capable of handling? Because some women say, well, oh, I couldn't do that, or I can't go that way, or I couldn't go to school, or I'm not smart enough to do this. And that's just not true necessarily. I mean, recently I've seen three women graduate in licensed vocational nursing. And of course, those are jobs are everywhere nowadays, any kind of medical nursing job. And some of them had some rough time getting through that. And, we gave them some support, gave them encouragement and ways to get by, and they did. And so I love it when I can help a mom and see her get through a crisis. Um, but believing that you can do it, that's the click check. You got to have that little turn in your brain that you can do it. because there are others that I've tried to convince and they just aren't convincible. And same thing with students. Anytime a teacher knows that, there are some that are teachable and there are some that just refuse to be taught. So that's the main thing is that little switch where you can say, I may not be able to do this over here, but I can do this. I'm thinking of a mom who became a widow this year, and I've been trying to convince her that she could make a living selling the pound cakes that she makes better than anybody I have ever tasted. They're just remarkable. And I keep telling her, you just put it out there, you will have people knocking your door down. But you see, you have to believe that first. You have to believe in that possibility. And I'm that way. I'm real persistent and I'm real strong about thinking, I can do this, I can do this. And maybe the reason I went to the University of Texas was because my husband didn't like it, my ex-husband. But no, I went because they had a program and they were great to me. They were great. And I praise them every time I can because I'm amazed. In fact, I was in the education program there, and every teacher taught the way they were teaching us to teach. They didn't just preach it, they practiced it. It was fabulous. So, um, that was me. That's my story. That's only my story. That doesn't mean that's what other people have to do. But there are baking cakes, I'm saying, seriously. Sewing, I love to sew. I even sold plants for a while. I mean, one Christmas, I didn't have enough money for Christmas for three kids. And so I painted sweatshirts. I was an art teacher at the time, and I knew how to paint. And people wanted these. They were doing that then. It was a long time ago, but they were painting these pictures, designs, whatever, on sweatshirts, and I could do it pretty well. And I sold them for Christmas money. So I'm just, I have something in the book about thinking of things you can do just to bring in pennies, even. It doesn't have to be a salary. It could be in addition to a menial job that you have that you add to so that you have extra funds.
Well, I think you touched on something really important about grief by sharing that story about making sweatshirts and even encouraging the woman to sell her pound cakes. Is that I truly believe that grief in many ways can open up doors for us to understand what our gifts and our purpose is in life. And I was really glad what you said that this was just my story. I appreciate you saying that because all too often in today's culture and society, we have so many things at our fingertips. There's so many options, so many availabilities. And it can get overwhelming that we almost forget to actually look within ourselves and say, what are my strengths? What are my gifts? What's my contribution? And I think that when we try to don't play to our strengths, we get lost in a sea of things and almost lose ourselves, especially going through grief and trying to heal. But if you're great at making pound cakes, I say go for it. I don't frown on that at all because I have no idea if one person that might have a connection with a distributor would get their hands on that and say, "Oh, we can now mass produce this and make XYZ dreams happen." Or same thing with your shirts, by the way. In today's society, I see people make t-shirts all the time and they're very, very profitable. But these are people that lean into their gifts, they lean into their purpose, their travels, their grief story, their healing journey. They lean into themselves and not so much the outside world. And I think that when we're able to do that in grief, something else you brought up, we're creating that new identity that's our own. It's not somebody else's. And I think that that too can be a powerful gift as we navigate grief.
Yes, and that brings me to personality types. That's something I studied and have studied for 25 years, is the difference in personalities. And sometimes when a woman comes out of a relationship or even is widowed, she has forgotten who she is. She is done for the person she was married to or for her children. And if you can get your hands on a personality profile, and start looking at, like you said, your strengths. You may come out thinking completely differently about what you can do based on that. Just simply, what are your strengths?
I love that you brought up personality tests because I've taken those over the years. And sometimes you're answering those questions and you're saying, this doesn't sound like me, or I'm sure I feel this way about X. And sure enough, it leads you to that place of saying, well, yeah, I'm actually, that personality type makes sense to me. That's actually a part of who I am. And,
Right. Hmm.
back to what you said about acceptance too, I think, I've been around a lot of women in my working career. I've been around in real estate, for example. I was around a lot of women who got divorced or widowed and had children. And I was really honestly amazed at these women that would take a 2-year-old child to open houses and sell homes to pay the bills and create a career path. And it really blew my mind because nobody knows how hard that actually is, and it's very
Mm.
difficult. Um, but like you said, I saw a lot of these women go through very hard circumstances of life, and I found them to be very resilient because of what you said about being open to your options, open to your mindset, discovering who they actually are, their identity. Not I'm a spouse or I'm a mom or I'm this, but who's this woman here who's living her life? And when we can allow that woman to come to the surface and actually just meet herself and accept herself fully for who she is, I think there's a lot of power in that to heal yourself in some very deep ways.
Yeah. Yeah. J.K. Rowling comes to mind, but not all of us are going to become world famous. But, she was sitting at a coffee shop when she wrote all of that, Harry Potter. She was a single mother. And there are others that you can look to that are pretty well known that are out there being single moms in the world. And you can put yourself down or you can say, hey, it's possible. It's possible that I could do something. And it could be there's all kinds of things nowadays you can do. Lots of things. And that's what I like to encourage moms to look at. Look at their strengths, look at what's possible, look at ways that you can forge ahead. And it may be very tiny baby steps. You don't have to do a grand thing. You can do little things every day that lead to the place you want to be.
So what are some challenges you run into when you're coaching? For example, you said you recently had a woman you're working with who became a widow, and they're in that throes of grief stage, which I always say the first year or two is usually the hardest because life has now radically shifted from I always say when we go through grief, our life that was on autopilot, like everything's fine, everything's safe, everything's okay, it's dependable, it's reliable, all kind of falls apart in some way. And now we're kind of in this quandary of figuring out, what's this new life look like? What's my new identity look like? How do you help women navigate that transition?
Well, like I said earlier, I really encourage them to be easy on themselves. Take some time to be kind to themselves. Do things that make them feel good, like whether it's a bubble bath, a pedicure, reading a book, or just giving themselves permission to have downtime, to grieve, to let go, maybe to write journals, but not to push themselves too much. And we're talking about a new identity, which involves pushing, maybe, but I'm talking about the first year or two after a death, a divorce, or some other kind of grief, is not pushing yourself past it, not thinking, I don't want to deal with this, so I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to go escape. I'm going to run. I'm going to go out to a club. I'm going to, date somebody else. I'm going to do this. That doesn't really help resolve the grief. The grief is going to have to do its course, run its course. But you can do some things for yourself gently that give you a sense of I'm okay. Nothing's wrong with me. I am okay. This isn't my fault. I'm going to be fine. Tomorrow I'm going to do this and just keep it going like that a couple of years until you get to a point where you can make a decision to do something significantly different. I try people, don't move if you can help it. Don't, for heaven's sakes, don't remarry or something right away. Uh, give yourself some time to grieve, to breathe in this new life that you're living.
Well, it sounds like I love your idea that taking small steps is the best way forward with that because I do feel that a lot of us can get very reactive in those moments of grief when life changes and we almost want to go back to the way things were. We want to fix it right away. We want that comfort and safety we want really quickly, but many times it doesn't happen. And I think that that mindset of taking one small step a day can really take that big audacious goal basically and shrink that down to something manageable because I've coached people in grief that just getting out of bed and taking a shower is an accomplishment. Just
Yes.
that. And I know that sounds crazy to some people, but to me, it makes sense.
It does.
Um,
It does, really. It
yeah.
does.
And
Yeah,
maybe yeah.
get
Yeah.
dressed, maybe go out somewhere to a park, just some little things. They don't have to be monumental things.
And I think that gives, all of us that go through grief a way to rebuild our nervous system in a way where we can handle more at a certain point. But when we do go through grief, our body changes physiologically where we just can't handle a certain amount of stress or we can't handle a certain environment. I can't imagine what that was like, by the way, trying to raise three kids on your own and trying to recover from going through a narcissistic abuse relationship and trying to make sense of what happened. And all of that's a lot to process. It's a lot to try to understand and comprehend. And, Gail, like I said, we're from two different generations. And now today, you can pick up a cell phone and just, surf the internet and figure out research, do this or that. Back then they didn't have cell phones. I mean, we didn't have them when I grew up when I was a little kid. We didn't have them.
No,
So we were trying to figure out, what is this thing in our life and what does this mean? And we didn't have the ability to go to Google and ask the questions.
no. And there's so much out there now. Oh my goodness. And there are jobs out there. If you're just wanting to stay home with your children, there are job ways to do it, which really wasn't an option for me. But I think that now it's overwhelming. You have to get past the overwhelming and get to the acceptance of things as they are, and then go from there. But
But,
once you have gotten to that point, the opportunities are endless.
acceptance I've come to find is the hardest stage of grief, I feel like, for everybody. And something I always encourage everyone to know is I can't tell you when you're going to quote unquote get over it. I can't tell you that. I can't tell you when you're going to find acceptance. I can't. I can walk beside you. I can offer to support you and guide you, which I'm sure you do for your women that you work with. But it's a beautiful thing to see when people do reach that point because it will come one day. It will come when the timing's right. And I do feel like when you get to acceptance, a lot of the very heavy, the very hard emotions, they start to quiet down a little bit. You start to come to this place to just say, this is where I'm at, and it's okay. And I'm not running anybody's race right now other than my own. And
Exactly. Hmm.
I'm the only one who's had my experience. Nobody else has.
Yeah.
And I think it can give you a sense of empowerment deep within.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
So, so Gail, I wanted to ask you, you created this organization, Single Moms Empowered. When did this organization come about?
It was an evolutionary process. I decided I wanted to do something fun for single moms, so I started having events. And this was back in 2007. And I started just having big happy days in a home where we gave them gifts and all this. And then we started having retreats for about 6 years. We had retreats, overnight retreats, and those were very spiritual and uplifting. And at one point, probably around 2007, 15, we started realizing that we wanted to do something lasting. And so we started working with education. And I'm also a member of a international organization that helps women go back to school. And so we worked with that, and then we remodeled it after some organization here in Texas and a few across the country that bring women in for a couple of years give them support, help them with child support, and get them through school. Now, when I say through school, usually it's a 2-year program where they can get a little degree like LVN, dental hygiene, that sort of thing. But we also now have a police officer, social worker, different ones that have finished. And we offer them a support system, a safety net. If they have trouble, we're there. It's not everyone's different. It's not like a cookie cutter approach where everybody gets the same treatment. Some moms may need tires on their car. Other moms may simply need help with childcare, which is enormously expensive. And so we help them with those things in order for them to get to a point where they have a degree that leads to employment.
Mm.
Direct, whatever they're doing needs to be something that we know they can get a job with, that then they can support their children. And we have been successful. It is so exciting to watch this happen and see these moms successful. Changes, talk about changing their identity. They really become nurses, radiologists, dental hygienists, social workers, police officers. It's thrilling to watch. And it just happened over a period of years. Now I have a board of directors and I don't have to do much of the work.
Well, that sounds like a very meaningful purpose, and I'm so excited to hear that you've been helping so many women establish career paths that align with themselves and to be able to support their family in a whole new way. And just everything we talked about today, creating a new identity, being able to get to acceptance so they can create a new life. I just feel like you're doing so much beautiful work out there.
Thank you.
So, and Gail, I also wanted to ask, it sounds like you wrote a book as well. I wanted to ask you about what your book is called and if you wanted to share a little bit about your book with us.
Yeah. The book is Living, Learning, Loving. And I had 3 kids, so we did that on this cover. It's a book of insights and encouragement on the path of motherhood, and every chapter has stories. Most of them have been published elsewhere, but they're stories that I went through, examples of things I learned as I went through them. And so it's the kind of book I would have liked to have read when I was going through it. A personal person can, like, I could reach out and listen to them and make a connection with somebody. And so, yeah, I've just given away about 1,950 of them. And they're in some stores in New Jersey and, they're out there. And so they're books that also have questions at the end of each chapter to help somebody kind of rethink maybe situations in their lives and set some goals. But it's got all kinds of things from solitude to personalities to what I learned teaching blind kids and just prayer, things about prayer. It's also got a chapter on boundaries, which is another key topic that I address a lot because I think most women don't feel comfortable, even today, even in this generation, they're not all comfortable setting boundaries. Now, I think your generation's better than mine was because of the way we were raised, but I don't think it's over completely because women are still living in abusive relationships. And, that's just not acceptable. It's not. And so, yeah, that's where it is. And I hope somebody will look at it. I, I'm not making money on this book, I can tell you for sure. But it's just my heart reaching out to women, mothers.
And I wanted to ask you if somebody watching this podcast is interested in buying that book, can they find it on Amazon or a website of some kind?
Yeah, I prefer Barnes and Noble. Amazon doesn't do me any good, but it is on Amazon. It is on Barnes and Noble. It is on Bookshop, and you can go to my website and click and get directly to purchase the book. Uh, and my website's gailshowalter.com. It's real easy to find. And so I'm sure you're going to give those websites links to people.
Yeah, for listeners today, I'll have all of her links in the show notes when you guys get done watching the episode. If you're on YouTube, scroll down to the show notes. You guys will find the links to her book as well as her nonprofit organization. I encourage you guys to check out each of them, as you've heard today in this powerful episode. That Gail's done some very powerful work to help, as I like to say, right the imbalance of things going on with women in relationships and even in career paths, and helping women learn how to navigate through grief and find empowerment. I'm Gail, I'm just really glad we got to meet today. You're a perfect fit for the Empower Grief Journey.
Well, I thank you. You know, one of our mom's husband committed suicide. We had a big storm. Almost everybody in the country knew about Harvey flooding out people, and her husband couldn't handle the damage. It was awful, and he jumped off a bridge. And she came to me, and we got her through. She is now a registered nurse working on becoming a physician's assistant. Uh, and that's the kind of thing we do. We take women that are in grief, in hardships, and we help them get through it.
That's such a beautiful mission, Gail, because that's the one thing that people need as they go through grief is to have somebody aside with them to go through that path and through that journey together. And I can't imagine the impact that's made on her life, but I'm sure she's very grateful for having crossed
Yeah,
paths with you.
she's a sweetie. Love her.
Yeah. Well, Gail, thank you so much for being on the show today and just for sharing your story of your life that you've gone through and just how you're helping other women in the community you're in get their own path forward through grief. I think that, like I talk about on the show quite often, grief puts us on a path we don't always see up front that is going to make sense or be something where we want to be in our life, but it puts us on the path to doing very, very good work for other people and serving others from a place of empathy, kindness, and compassion. So I just want to say thank you for being the person that you are.
And thank you for doing the work you're doing. It's really good, really good.
Well, thank you. And I'll continue making my work matter because when I run across people like you, I just get more inspired. So thank you.
Great.
So, well, I just want to let you guys know today. Thank you for joining us on another powerful episode with Gail today. If this episode resonates with you guys, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from her story. For more episodes designed to empower you and support you, visit empowergriefjourney.com. You could subscribe to the podcast there and join us on Apple and Podbean. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know that you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.